Hello and welcome to Moneylife News and Views. I am Debashis Basu. The Indian government is in the final stages of setting up a new high level body to cut regulatory hurdles and red tape, according to news reports. The structure, operating under National Manufacturing Mission, is meant to slash bureaucratic delays and help triple merchandise exports by 2035. Now, tripling exports over 9 years implies a compounded annual growth rate of around 13%. Is this credible? Indian exports hardly grow. In theory, nothing is impossible. After all, China has shown that truly exceptional outcomes can be achieved under exceptional circumstances. In practice, however, sustaining export growth of this magnitude would require no lost years, a buoyant global trading system rather than emerging trade fortresses triggered by Donald Trump's tariffs, no global downturns, no prolonged policy slippages, and manufacturing exports growing faster than GDP year after year after year for a whole decade. How credible is this? India would need not merely a good run, but something close to a near peak performance that was once achieved by the Asian Tigers in their best years. Even then, those great historic performances occurred when China was a minnow rather than a dominant force looming over global manufacturing and trade as it is today. If this is genuinely India's ambition, history offers some very instructive benchmarks. Consider first South Korea, perhaps the only country to have lifted itself from poverty to first world status within a single generation. Its best sustained export boom was a CAGR of around 18% between 1965 and 1985. Manufacturing expanded rapidly, moving up in the value added chain from textiles to steel to automobiles and then to electronics. The state played a central role. The currency was undervalued, credit was directed, export targets were imposed, and firms were punished for missing them. South Korea was poor, wages were low, and global trade was expanding rapidly. Korea also benefited from unusually close trade and geopolitical ties with the United States. Taiwan followed a similar trajectory. During 1965-1980, for 15 years, its exports grew at a roughly 16% per annum. The formula was dense clusters of small and medium-sized enterprises, deep supply networks, aggressive technology absorption, and strong access to the American market, once again, exactly like South Korea. Taiwan managed double-digit export growth of for around 15 years, again from a very low base and with low wages. More relevant for India are Thailand and Malaysia, both middle income and democratic or semi-democratic countries operating under constraints closer to India's own. Thailand's true export boom ran roughly from 1986 to 1996 before the Asian financial crisis, when merchandise exports grew at a CAGR of about 14%. This was powered by a sharp devaluation of their currency baht in 1984, a surge of Japanese foreign direct investment, global and regional production networks, labor-intensive manufacturing and electronics assembly, a predictable trade regime, and a global trade boom. Thailand became a classic latecomer export platform. Between 1987 and 2000, Malaysia's merchandise exports grew by almost 14% a year. The strategy was aggressive export promotion, industrialization through foreign investment in free trade zones, mainly from Japan, but also from Taiwan and South Korea, which were by then seeking lower wage locations. By 1996, manufactured goods, especially electrical machinery and electronics, accounted for over 80% of total exports. A stable currency, export-friendly policies, fast ports and customs clearance, a skilled semi-technical workforce, and specialization in electronics turned Malaysia into a key node in the global electronic supply chain. As Thailand and Malaysia ran into limits in more recent years owing to messy politics and lack of policy breakthroughs, a new Asian tiger emerged. Vietnam's exports grew at around 14% a year from 2005 to 2024 as it transformed itself from a minor regional exporter into a global manufacturing hub. It is the only large economy today sustaining tiger-like export performance. As labor costs rose in China and geopolitical tensions intensified, Vietnam became the preferred destination for multinational firms like Samsung, Apple's contract manufacturers, and Intel. Vietnam is also a super joiner of different kinds of trade agreements, winning preferential or duty free access to many of the world's largest markets. In a striking case of corporate led growth, Samsung alone accounts for nearly 13.4% of Vietnam's total exports, with the country serving as the firm's global smartphone production hub. Vietnam combines this with a young and literate, disciplined workforce at costs significantly below that of China and even Thailand or Malaysia. Despite global headwinds and tougher American trade policies, including a brief episode of reciprocal tariffs in early 2025, Vietnam recorded a 20 billion trade surplus last year and achieved a GDP growth of 8%. A charitable view is that we have made a start to emulate the Asian tigers 4 decades later. After all, India has become a big base for Apple's smartphone exports. Apple's share would be about 5% of India's exports this year and rising. But then, India's exports to GDP itself is at a very low level of 21%, whereas that of Vietnam is about 86%. It will take a lot for export growth led by large companies to reach a meaningful share. Beyond anecdotal evidence, history suggests that sustaining export growth of around 13% for a decade requires these conditions: cheap currency, strong central coordination and disciplined policy execution, a large surplus of labor at low wages, assured access to large and open markets, and a willingness to tolerate overcapacity and frequent failures. India currently possesses none of these in sufficient measure. Instead, India is facing headwinds from rising protectionism, aggressive dumping by China, and reforms that are often procedural rather than outcome oriented. What India does have in abundance instead is red tape such as license, circular, registrations, permissions, returns, displays, registrars, challans, renewals, notices, which all lead to corruption. According to a 2024 white paper by Team Lee's RegTech, Indian businesses are subject to 1,536 different laws, translating into 69,233 compliances and 6,618 annual filings. Of these, 26,134 compliances prescribe imprisonment as a penalty for violations. Labor regulation alone accounts for 463 acts, that is 30%, 32,542 compliances, that is 47% of the total, and 3,048 filings, that is 46%. India's weak manufacturing base, modest export performance, and dense regulatory thicket are not new problems. Successive governments have tried to address them through incremental tinkering. National Manufacturing Mission is one more. It was announced last year but has still not got going in any practical sense. Such efforts have been and will amount to too little and too late. If you like this video, please do subscribe and do share. Thanks.